This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. From the age of 2, I have been letting my light shine. Playing Suzuki violin, being involved in band and orchestra, landing a front row seat at the Philadelphia High School for Girls for graduation as a result of getting to know every member of my class and becoming executive council member. So it had nothing to do with my title of Jeneen the Neon Queen. It was the fact that I loved to get to know people, and I still do. Restorative practice is the social science of relationships. Imagine that, something that your favorite teacher, your favorite counselor, your favorite track coach, like I was to Sasha growing up, and also being able to repair and restore relationships when conflict occurs. Whenever we have 2 or more gathered, there is likely a conflict that will occur. So when and not if a conflict occurs, I want to invite you to try restorative approaches. The International Institute of Restorative Practices is where I acquired my training licensure to be able to train people across our school district. However, I want to add the caveat that restorative practices is not just appropriate in schools, but it is mandatory and required outside of our schools in order to be effective. One of the joys that I get in my daily life as the Supervisor of Student Supports and former principal of a middle school, also a former teacher for over 20 years in education, from North Carolina to Washington, D.C. to Maryland, I have enjoyed getting to know people, learning from people, learning about people, and being restorative with people. Restorative practices is based on the social discipline window. The social discipline window is the cornerstone of everything we do restorative. I want to take a few moments and share with you 4 pillars that will help you evaluate your interactions and the interactions of others that you meet on a daily basis. My most memorable recent restorative interaction was with Shar from Starbucks. She greeted me, she welcomed me, she talked about her parents who were, ironically, in the field of education, and she actually got me to buy a cup that I would have never purchased because it was pink and green, the opposite of my sorority. However, she was modeling restorative practices. Her warm, friendly demeanor, her knowledge of everything on the menu, and her memorable presence. And throughout life, I think I've also been very restorative. So if you were a student at my middle school when I finally landed the opportunity to become principal, you may remember my rap battle over the PA against my counselor, who won using a song from my hometown. Imagine that. She was also really restorative, however. I think she may have won because of her skill to be able to connect with everyone, no matter who they were, to make them feel like $1,000,000. That is restorative practices. Restorative practice in the social discipline window asks and require us to think about 4 pillars. Pillar number 1. It's the side that you think of in a time of crisis. It might be the side you think of when you think of the least favorite teacher. It is the side that really developed restorative justice, and now we call restorative practices more in the school. It's related to the research on the school to prison pipeline. The philosophy suggests that we need to let go of what we call punitive practices. Things like expulsion, suspension, or even class removals. Instead, we need to replace them with restorative approaches. that also are just as much about control as our punitive practices, but they're combined with support. Think about your favorite coach if you played sport, your favorite band director, your favorite teacher. I can remember all of mine. Miss Mosley, algebra. Wow, did I learn algebra? But she never cracked a smile. She held high expectations. Every now and then I would say something funny and get a smile from her. But her boundaries were high and her level of support was very appropriate for everyone. And I would imagine that everyone passed that class that year. The opposite of that was another teacher whose name I won't mention just in case she's watching this TED Talk now. I imagine that she was the reason why I can still get lost in my own neighborhood. You see, she taught geography to me and everyone in that class that year in 4th grade, but didn't support each and every child. Some of us didn't feel like we belonged in that class or that school at all. You see, my mother was a very restorative person, and she still is today. If you're my follower on social media, you probably have seen lots and lots of comments from my mother applauding and supporting me. She has believed in me since the age of 2 when she put me in Suzuki violin, to me driving from my neighborhood to a neighborhood farther away to provide opportunities. Restorative practitioners provide hope, opportunities, and adequate support for success for all people. I was fortunate to always be in a school where I was learning about different people, benefiting from Saturday school, benefiting from after-school programs, so that I could be competitive when I got to college. In college, I actually attended Howard University, and so that was kind of a culture shock for me because I was used to being around diverse populations. However, there was a lot of diversity there too, international diversity, right? And so restorative practices invites you to remember that in any situation, you are going to have people that look like you and look differently, that are going to think like you and think differently. And all of those people should feel welcome to express their opinions, to be heard, and to be listened to. So far we've discussed the restorative practitioner in our social discipline window, the punitive practitioner in our social discipline window. We have 2 more. We have the permissive pillar and we have the neglectful pillar. The permissive is kind of what we all experienced during quarantine. So if you remember me during quarantine because you're following me on social media, you may remember Jeneen of Jeneen Cares, where we're caring, achieving, restoring, empowering, and supporting our youth for the future. Yes, even though the Myers-Briggs assessment has me as an introvert, I just could not keep still during the pandemic. I needed to continue mentoring the youth like I have done as Girls with Pearls and Guys with Ties mentoring program in all of the schools that I've been a part of. I needed to use the members of my community who were like me, leaders in their respective cities, states, and different places and organizations and different jobs to be restorative. And so I use questions like, tell me about yourself first. What's been the hardest thing for you? What do you do to be in control still? It's hard for everyone. And what advice do you have for others as the pandemic continues? Restorative practitioners are always reflective, thinking about the past, the present, and the future. And so whether you are punitive, because I know that you're going to have times of crisis where you're going to have to operate with high control, right? For example, the fire alarm goes off in the school cafeteria and people are having lunch. I know there's a crisis and I want to find that child who pulled the alarm because I normally wouldn't do a fire drill at lunchtime, right? So you're going to have times where you're going to operate in a more restorative manner, where you are all about control and support, accountability. You're going to have times where you're exhausted and you operate in our final pillar, which is neglectful. It's because you're overwhelmed, you are tired, or maybe you just don't understand. There is one pillar that I want to leave you with because I do think I didn't mention this one as much. It's the permissive one. That's the one I mentioned during COVID when we were all operating on more support, less control. Our schools were closed. People emphasized care over content. When I think about the why I'm passionate about restorative practices, it's not just because my life has been full of restorative moments, because I've had some punitive moments, personally and professionally. It is because restorative practices has the ability to make change in simple ways. It doesn't cost you money, it just costs you your time. There are 5 simple ways that you could implement restorative practices. 1, your communication. Effective statements and effective questions. Effective statements, this is a test to see if you were listening. If I were to say, I don't care what you do, figure it out yourself, what box would I be operating in? What pillar of restorative in the social discipline window is that? Neglectful. If I were to say, you are aware of these expectations, how can I support you in meeting them? That's restorative. Restorative practices communication provides reflection, past, present, and future, like the questions, what happened? What were you thinking? What you can do to make things better? It also is all about control. So thinking about feedback, firm boundaries, and promoting empathy. It's also simple things like you would do with your family if you have family around the table at dinner and you get the opportunity to just hear about each other's day. Sitting in a circle, getting to know each other, developing relationships, strengthening relationships. They can be circles that are proactive or responsive. I remember the Baltimore riots and seeing how that school district embraced kindergarten children by inviting them to sit in a circle to hear what they were thinking and feeling, and then reminding them their expectations for safety and who they should go to if they ever felt afraid and how they should respond to crisis situations. Teachable moments. And small impromptu conferences, the 4th thing. Simply using private ways to resolve conflict that doesn't embarrass anyone or move anyone into a feeling of shame where they can do 4 things. They would avoid, withdraw, attack others, or attack self. And as a principal, I can remember seeing students respond accordingly in all of those compass of shame moments. And finally, formal conferences. Formal conferences is an opportunity for you to build community with people that have more expertise than you to help you solve problems or to problem solve, whether it's a family situation, truancy, return from a suspension, because restorative practices does not say we're going to get rid of consequences. We are going to have non-negotiables, but we will still suspend. But it is an invitation to have alternatives to our punitive practices. And so I leave you with the final call to action to lead with me. Learn more about people that you don't know and what people are dealing with using a trauma-informed plan. Empower others. Provide opportunities like the people who mentored me and ensure that had the opportunity to be successful in life. Act whenever you see something that you have the ability to change, whether it's just making someone's day brighter like Shar did at Starbucks, and dream big that we all can make a difference. And the home of the brave. Be brave and lead with restorative approaches.